and welcome to today's edition of Mindfly webinars on flight deck design philosophy, where we will discuss role reversal errors. I'm Squadron Leader Sargam Tatwavadi, and before we begin, I would like to tell you all a few things. The webinar is being recorded and will be available for you all to view once the session is over. We encourage your questions and suggestions, and I request you to type in your questions in the chat box. All attendees, please remain on mute. So we will begin the presentation by Captain Amit Singh, who's been an aviator for 30 years. He is a fellow of the Royal Aeronautical Society and is a training and safety expert. He also authors the blog Mindfly. I now hand over to Captain Amit.
Welcome to Mindfly. And I have a short presentation today. The presentation is on the design philosophy, cockpit design philosophy. While I was reading an article by one of the avionics manufacturer, they came up with very lofty words like ideal cockpit design and the pilot-centric design. I thought of in hindsight, when I look back, so what are the issues I've been facing? I spoke to a few friends and I identified this topic as role reversal error because it deals with the most basic instrument in the cockpit, the artificial horizon. So this is a presentation which deals with certain philosophies of cockpit design, human oriented, and we have both engineering side. So I will discuss the role reversal. There's a short survey. And of course, at the end of it, we have a conclusion and a discussion. So we have a lot of learned people who are joining in. So it's not that I am basically trying to initiate a discussion. So chats are most welcome. Anybody wants to give a suggestion, clarification, because it's not that I know it all. It is just beginning. So flight deck design philosophy and role reversal error. If you see, there have been a number of accidents associated with this. I'll pick a few. Those in India would remember the Airbus 320, the first one at Bangalore. There was an issue with automation and the flight directors. Under a check flight, one of the flight directors was switched off, the other one was not on the finals. So the aircraft mode was affected. This affected the thrust, and the requirement of a go-round thrust was not achieved. The aircraft crashed shortly before the runway. This happened in 1990. Then we have the Air Inter, the famous, when there was a confusion between the VS, the vertical speed, and the flight path angle. They dialed in the wrong one and descended fast, a CFATE accident. We have the Boeing 757 in Cali, where they inserted in the FMS, the NDB name, as you know, there are multiple names in the FMS. They turned towards the wrong one, again a CFATE. And this is the Nagoya. This is on the final approach. And there was a mistrim issue. So the pilots were basically fighting against the controls, against the trim. And of course, at the last minute, there was an upset from which they couldn't recover. This was with China Airlines, Airbus 300. Now, human error, everybody knows about human error. So, but are we ready to accept human error, or do we have a plan? Do we need to do something about it? There are statistics available. 87% of the accidents are attributable to human error. But the name as such indicts the pilot basically. So not much investigation has been done beyond just naming the human error. What was it due to? Was it preventable? And what was the situation that the pilot was in? Why did all the barriers fail? And the pilot is, of course, the last barrier. and the last barrier also failed. That is why we had an accident. But a proper root cause analysis is not always done. Therefore, the easiest thing is to blame the pilot and carry on. After the 3 accidents, which I mentioned before, there was a lot of criticism about the interfaces with automation. So humans were used to mechanically driven aircrafts, pulleys and cables, and they were in control. So they were motivated to fly the aircraft, and whatever inputs were there, the aircraft behaved as per that. With the introduction of automation, there were certain limitations. The pilot was moved a bit away from the actual controls. Maybe the pilot felt a bit demotivated. So what was the design philosophy behind that? That we need to see. After a lot of criticism, there was a special committee set up, an investigation, which happens after every accident. And FAA was recommended to evaluate the flight deck design for susceptibility to design-induced flight crew errors and the consequences of those errors as a part of the type certification process. Even now, these errors have been happening, and we will speak about those as well. This is the transition from the DC-10 on the top, 757, from the much crowded to the Airbus 320 on the right bottom, a cleaner, minimalistic aircraft. And on the left is Airbus 350. I would leave it to you to comment how simple. People say it is very easy to fly, but when you are under cognitive overload or stress, do you get the required information, what you desire, or is there a clutter? Does your eye have to hunt for information, or is presented right in front of you, which is intuitive? Human error analysis, the famous adage, to err is human. So that is what the automation side wants to say. Humans will make mistakes regardless of whatever preventive efforts you take. So therefore, build something that can prevent the human from making an error, basically taking the human out of the design loop. So systems are designed not only to recognize the onset of an error, but also to be fully reversible system to permit the operators to correct their errors such that any error made would not result in catastrophic accident. So either you say the pilots will make errors and we have to make an error-free system. Is it possible? We don't know. Another philosophy is there is no empirical data to support the premise that to err is inherent human trait. So it is just an adage, a saying, but what is the evidence? There is no empirical evidence. Human error is preventable, and the objective should be to design systems and create procedures or methodologies with the goal of reducing or eliminating human error. So the best solution would be something in between. So while we are going through this presentation, you should put yourself in the pilot seat and see, with respect to automation and the flight deck design, where do you stand? Are you in total control? Is the automation in total control? Or what we just discussed, I said about a compromise, is that happening? From the engineering perspective of flight deck design, there are 2 theories, theory W, theory Z. Theory W says that systems work because systems are well designed and scrupulously maintained. So this is favoring the engineers. Procedures are complete and correct. People behave as they are expected to, which is not always the case, and more importantly, do what they have been taught or trained to do. Well, ideally they should, but ideal situation never exists. And system engineers are able to foresee and anticipate every contingency. So to sum up, theory W thus describes well-tested and well-behaved systems where human performance variability clearly is a liability and where their inability to perform in a reliable manner is a risk. So again, it links to the first, that it is human to err, and we have to put the automation or the engineering controls as a barrier. Theory Z, which I'm sure a lot of you will agree to, is that systems work because people learn to identify and overcome design flaws and functional glitches. We have seen a lot of introductions, the Airbus 320, the OEM, the manufacturer, learned a lot from the airline because the airline was experimenting, or rather they learned and corrected a lot of things. With every introduction of new aircraft, we see these things happen. People can recognize the actual demands and adapt their performance. Accordingly, people can interpret and apply procedures to match the conditions, and people can detect and correct when something goes wrong or when it is about to go wrong. Hence, intervene before the situation becomes seriously worsened. So we have that gut feeling, the sixth sense that something is going to go wrong. From a psychological aspect, there is another very interesting thing which we will discuss later about how pilots adapt and accept the errors or drawbacks of the system and treat it as their forte. So they treat it as their strong point that we have overcome the system. So that's another psychological issue that we'll discuss later. So to sum up, we can say Theory Z proposes that systems work because people are flexible and adaptive, rather than because the systems have been perfectly thought out and designed. So practically, this has quite a bit of truth. Humans are no longer a liability and performance variability is not at risk. Human factor engineering, the ideal thing, what I was talking about, they would like to say that your instrumentation and flight deck design should be as intuitive and natural, which means that you don't have to think too much before interpreting the indications. It should be a direct reading or a color-coded message, which gives you a clear yes or no, go or no go. Because when you're cognitively overloaded under high stress situation, then your attention span is limited. So a lot of peripheral issues are dropped out if you are concentrating too hard on one particular aspect. We have seen it in a number of accidents that the warnings have been blaring, GPWS, but the pilots do not seem to respond because the brain cuts out the sensors and directs the attention to what they are concentrating on, maybe the instruments. So that is a cognitive function of the brain. It is important to know the limitations of the brain and then also design the cognitive part of engineering. This should be simple and direct as possible. So a direct reading gauge is the easiest one. The only way forward is by recentering the cockpit design around the pilot's need using cognitive engineering. This is from Thales. Well, they would say the ideal thing, but you think, does it always happen? Let's see what Honeywell says. Rockwell Collins. They stress the understanding of the pilot's mental model of the system, his understanding of how the system is organized, how it works. A pilot may not need to know all the engineering details of a system in order to fly the aircraft. So when we were flying the good old Boeing, so everything, people knew the nuts and bolts of the aircraft. The training was such, and people would like to dig in deep to find out how things work. As the fly-by-wire and more automation came in, the OEM said that things are too complicated, interconnected, so there is no need to know what's inside the system. Don't go inside the layers, just follow the procedures which have been given. Now, this basically demotivated the pilot because it took away the authority. Now, you don't know the aircraft, you're just sitting there as an operator. It's like backseat driving, somebody's telling you what to do. So you basically switch off. So after a number of years, when again, because of complacency, or you could say erosion of flying skills, the accident rate increased, then the OEM suddenly changed their philosophy. They said, no, you have to be in control. You should know these things. And to this level, you should know your system. You should know the procedures, why the procedures were formed. So then there's a flip again. So it goes back and forth. But ultimately, if the aircraft is designed with the pilot in the center and with the pilot being aware of what's happening, we've seen that in the Boeing 737 MAX case also. We can discuss it later. But even though the pilot was involved in the production engineering aspect, but those who fly online also need to know what's inside. The level knowledge should be free. It should be given, and the pilot should be given an option how much deeper he can go. This is the example I took, the artificial horizon, which is quite interesting. So this says inside out or outside in. There are two types of artificial horizons here. So either we are sitting inside the aircraft, see the aircraft level and the horizon turns when we bank. Or we keep the horizon straight and the aircraft turns. So it all depends how you view. If you view from outside, the aircraft is turning. If you view from inside, the horizon is turning. So how does it affect? Now we have three types of artificial horizons. The commercial aircraft, we can take the second as general aviation, third is military. In the commercial aircraft, the sky pointer or the roll index moves in the opposite direction of the turn, which is the first one. So in order to roll the wings back, the pilot has to move the index in the opposite direction of the turn. The second one is general aviation, where the index moves along with the aircraft in the turn. So it comes back naturally. And the third is the military, where you have the earth pointer. The earth pointer is also supposed to be very safe. So how does this affect? This basically, if you look at intuitive design, so that is the first aspect we saw, that design should be intuitive, direct reading. So there is a dichotomy here, which is when we compare the pitch, if you push the stick down, the aircraft goes down. Pull the stick up, aircraft goes up. But in case of bank, it happens the opposite way in commercial aircraft. If you see the picture, you're banking right and the roll index is going left. So this is basically a counterintuitive thing. So the stick moves intuitively, which we have seen, push the stick down, aircraft goes down, which is not the case in case of roll. The roll is opposite in case of a commercial aircraft. So this is counterintuitive. So this is, in case of a high stress situation, this will not come out naturally and the chances of mistake are very high. But does this happen only in case of high stress? Let's see a survey. This is a survey performed on 13 pilots, 390 trials. As you can see, the first bar is military. In between, we have commercial. Then we have general aviation. Military and commercial is the error rates are same. But the commercial is 5 times higher because it is a counterintuitive maneuver. So what needs to be thought of is, if this is a well-documented research, a study, then why do the manufacturers persist on it? Is it because the military aircrafts come from another region of the world and their ideology doesn't match with another region of the world? So is it a regional issue or an ideological issue? Because when the numbers are so high, 5 times, then it is a safety issue. I decided to do a small survey, a very quick one. From Mindfly, we posted it out, got some responses, close to 100. And some of them suggest very interesting outcomes. We asked them, do you still misinterpret the bank? 53% said yes, we do. 35.9 said no, we don't. 10.9 said maybe. Okay, so the other question would be, were you already under stress when you misinterpreted the bank? 55.9 said yes, we were under stress. But a remarkable 44.1 said we were not under stress. So that is a significant amount. People are not under stress. Still, there is a misinterpretation of the bank. And 54.3 are not aware of liens. So what are liens? Liens is something which causes or a major contributor to the reversal error, the role reversal error. 38% said yes, they're aware. 7.6 said maybe, they were not sure. So the conclusion of the survey conducted by the Swedes is, while commercial inside-out artificial horizons are increasingly the Western norm, in the near future, even in general aviation, it almost consistently produces the worst roll recovery performance. So the effect of roll index, sky pointer, and roll reversal errors. This is a study conducted by Singer and Decker, Department of Aeronautics. They found commercial setup roll index is almost 5 times more likely to produce roll reversal errors than military or general aviation configuration. So this is quite intriguing if it is documented so well. What prevents the manufacturers from changing this to a more safer option that general aviation is already following? So the conclusion of the Mindfly survey was, do you find interpreting and recovery from a roll as easy and intuitive as pitching the aircraft up and down? 51% said yes, but 48.9 said no. This is almost a 50-50. A lot of people are not sure or they get confused. The final question, in your opinion, with the advent of new generation aircraft, how is the complexity of the flight deck changing from the pilot's perspective as compared to the previous generation aircraft? The conclusion is 53.3% of the pilots say the complexity is increasing in the new generation of aircraft. 39.1 say complexity is decreasing, and 7.6 say no change in complexity. So people feel that with the increased level of automation from the manufacturer side, they're building engineering controls so that pilot errors can be reduced, workload can be reduced, situational awareness can be enhanced. But why does the pilot feel that complexity is increasing? That you need to think, we should discuss and debate. Liens induced reversal errors. So since a lot of pilots were unaware that this is a big issue, liens, it is a spatial disorientation. And it is associated with a small bank, which is kind of neutralized by our sensory systems. If there is a small bank and the body gets used to it, the vestibular system, so we assume that we are flying level, even though we have a small bank. So in case of if in case we want to turn, this small amount, the residual amount, is added to what we were intending to add. 12% of loss of control accidents in transport and commuter aircraft, and 24% of fatalities between 1996 and 2010 attributed to spatial disorientation, and liens is a leading cause for that. There was an accident in which an aircraft took off. Soon after takeoff, the pilot introduced a 30-degree right bank. And thereafter, he got distracted by some other thing. In the meanwhile, the aircraft rolled out and went towards the other side. The co-pilot, the pilot monitoring, called out bank, bank. So the pilot, assuming that he's still on the right bank, gave a left bank, which added to the bank. The aircraft stalled and crashed. So this is an issue. A number of aircraft accidents in the commercial and general aviation have happened because of this. The most prevalent form of spatial disorientation in aviation is the Leeds illusion. This is caused by the vestibular system being insensitive to low roll accelerations, leading to an incorrect sensation of bank angle. An incorrect expectation due to spatial disorientation may induce role reversal errors. So if you are expecting a bank, because of expectation, your cognitive dissonance plays up, and it adds up to the bank basically. The accident at Patna of the Alliance Air Boeing 737 was inconclusive, but it could also be attributed to leans or roll rate reversal errors, because the aircraft went to a bank, then steep bank and stalled. Although it is not conclusive, but it could be possible. It could be investigated from that angle. The presence of lean cues led to an increase of roll rate errors by a factor of 2.6. From the cognition part, as I said, that with the human centered in the design philosophy, or if the display design fails to account for human cognitive limitations, the result can be prone to errors, confusion, and inefficiencies. The advent of modern glass cockpit and the increased complexity of automation, it is basically not the complexity of automation, it is interconnected systems which the pilot is not very sure of, because he's been told or he's not been given too much information. So if one system is operated, which all sensors are taking sense from this system, the pilot is not sure. So the pilot is very wary of taking or making too many inputs in the system, not very confident about the automation. This is a human error template UK survey from the Cranfield University, which says that 79% in green, pilots have reported, 79% of pilots have reported they have made errors in detecting the heading and the speed knob. So instead of the heading, they've pulled speed, and for turning left, they turned the speed knob left, which amounted to decrease in speed. So that is the highest. So why are they placed next to each other? That also need to be questioned. Similar knobs. In the 1940s, it was recorded that people started saying that most of the human error accidents are not human error, they could be design errors. So there were aircrafts which had similar looking knobs, both for landing gear and flaps control. So there were a lot of incidents after landing. Instead of retracting flaps, the landing gear would go up. So these were design issues. It's just how you investigate, how deep you go to investigate. And next, if we would see incorrect baro setting, which is very common, 45.7% of the pilots say we have done this. Monitoring the glide slope or failing to arm the approach. So these are certain errors associated with automation, which are happening, but nothing much has been done. So maybe on the next generation aircraft, something else, a new barrier will come up. But as you introduced new barriers, latent threats also keep coming up. So new aircraft, new automation, it could have certain new risks which you never thought of. So it is not that the risks will stop. There will always be threats, but ultimately the pilot is here to manage. You cannot build an error-free automation system. So as per there was a human project in which Airbus was also a part in Europe about man-machine interface. So it said gave a very true picture. And it's kind of philosophical, which says that since errors are not intentional, and since we do not need a particular theory of errors, it is meaningless to talk about mechanisms that produce errors. So nobody does mistake deliberately causing an accident or harm. It is basically slips or lapses. Instead, we must be concerned with the mechanism that are behind normal action. So that is also called a safety A, which means that if the pilots are doing something right, there must be something right about it. So why not work towards making sure that they do it 100% right, rather than building up defenses so that he doesn't make a mistake. So if you have an SOP, follow an SOP, make sure you follow the SOP properly to the T. If you are going to use the term psychological mechanism at all, we should refer to faults in the functional mechanism rather than error producing mechanism. We must not forget that in the theory of action, the very same mechanism must also account for correct performance, which is a rule rather than exception. Inventing separate mechanisms for every single kind of human error may be great fun, but is not very sensible from a scientific point of view. So invest in the human rather than on a machine, which is not being done in the same proportion. A lot of investment is going on in the avionics field, the aircraft design field, but not too much emphasis is being paid towards developing the cognitive part. Captain Sabu just sent me an article today that US is now looking into reducing or producing a helicopter wherein the cognitive loads are reduced to the minimum. So now it is also coming up in the design factor. That pilot is there, ultimately the pilot has to take an action. So how is the cognitive part being addressed? So papers are being invited for that. So to conclude, you can say the primary display. So when we say the intuitive design of the cockpit, the primary display is the artificial horizon, in which the role is still an issue and is not pilot centric, does not favor the pilot. So what are we going to do about it? Are we going to deal with it? Or is there a change going to happen? That we need to see. With the advent of new technology, the complexity is increasing since the pilot is out of the design loop. Now, industrial psychologist Brainbridge wrote off this line, which says the irony that the more advanced the control system is, so the more crucial may be the contribution of the human operator. How is very interesting. The reasoning was that in an automated system, the human operator would be called on only when things go wrong and would therefore require more skills and knowledge than an operator doing ordinary work. So if you're flying the machine manually, you are with the machine. But if things become too complicated with complex automation and interrelated systems, when things go wrong, the pilot has to use more of knowledge and cognitive power, situational awareness to deal with the situations. So the failures will become more complex with high level of automation as compared to the earlier times where there was simpler automation and pilot was in the center. And last but not the least, new tools means new risk. Now, I conclude the presentation here. We can have a discussion based on the chats we have, and thereafter we have the webinar page, the YouTube, the blog, and you can post your comments, suggestions, and we can discuss on other social media network. Thank you very much for your attention. I hand the podium to Sargam to take it forward.
Thank you, Captain Amit. So while we wait for the questions to come in, I would like to ask you something. How important do you think it is to involve the inputs of pilots in the design of the flight deck?
Well, as you see, different philosophies of design. Under the different philosophies, either you keep the pilot-centric, automation-centric, or a compromise of the two. So now this is from the design perspective, but from the user perspective, you have to see the lowest mean level, the lowest level of acceptable performance of the pilot. Is that enough to deal with the automation? But you have test pilots and engineers and doctorates who are at the test site. A lot of pilots attending would have more knowledge on that. But the user base is different. And when you're flying on line, your pressures are different. You have more of social pressures and other operational related pressures. So does the design aspect deal with these things? That needs to be seen.
Right. And what, in your opinion, is the way forward?
Well, the way forward is basically to keep the pilot in the loop and keep him informed. First thing in information, do not say that this information is not desired or this information need not be shared with the crew, as we have seen in the Boeing. But if you keep people informed, then it is their responsibility that they keep themselves updated. So it is not that you come down and reveal all the layers, but any information is good information. It is it all depends on how the pilot uses it. So even if you give the whole book to a pilot, the pilot who does not want to read it will not read it. But the person who is desirous, who wants to read, will of course, he'll suck up all the information. So the basic thing is, do not hold any information. Knowledge should always be free.
Right.
Knowledge should not be kept inside books or under locks. That's what I feel.
Yes, like we have seen in a few of the recent cases with the MAX, but despite information being available, it was not made public. So
if you want to, I can share some interesting information about the MAX, which a lot of people might not know. I have 2 more slides on that. MAX, the basic issue was with MCAS. So MCAS, the pilots were not aware of MCAS. Even after the Indonesian accident, there was a lot of issue about what is MCAS. Is there an MCAS or not? Because Boeing was not coming out clean about this issue. But I did some research, study, digging up. So I found out there is only one country in the world which was training its pilots from the beginning on MCAS. That was Brazil. So I went to the Brazil site and I found out that there is enough information available. Then I went to find out about Boeing's history, Boeing's accidents. So if you see on the 737, people would remember there were a lot of accidents attributable to the rudder design. But of course, Boeing never accepted it until the Silkair accident happened. So I got hold of this US court ruling. So the lower courts had given immunity to the manufacturer if the certification was approved. So Boeing was immune to any lawsuits if FAA had approved the design, which was the case. But in 2019 or 2018 sometime, this court ruling came up, which clearly said that 1994 US 427 accident was caused by defective design of the rudder control system. And again, Flight 585 also caused by dangerous design of 737 rudder control. I also have evidence which says that the famous TWA 800, the center tank which blew up, was due to the wiring issue, which both Boeing and FAA were aware of. That is also a part of the court ruling. So these are design defects, known design defects. And in this case, there was a compensation paid out. So if Boeing was not liable for any suits or any action, why did they pay out compensation? So they were aware of this. So I wrote a blog, basically. I put out this, this is called the ODR table, Operational Differences table, when a new aircraft is introduced. So the Brazilians, since they manufacture an aircraft, they have a team in place which will examine the new aircraft. They examine the MAX along with Boeing. So based on Boeing recommendation, they introduced training for pilots. So this says flight controls MCAS type B training. So they had training from the beginning. So why did Boeing not introduce training for the rest of the world? Nobody knows. So this is one thing interesting. So when I wrote this blog, then of course, something had to happen. Interestingly, Boeing wrote back. So Boeing denied everything, that your blog is incorrect. There is nothing to do with the previous generation accidents. And at the end, if you see, they wrote, as our customers and their passengers continue to fly 737 MAX to hundreds of destinations around every day, they have our assurance that 737 MAX is as safe as any airplane that has ever flown the skies. And soon after that, we had the Ethiopian accident. So things happen, but known design defects are issues which are ethical issues. So pilot has to be informed. That is what I try to imply through this.
Right. Okay, so moving on to the questions, we have a question from Vishal where he says leans is one of the most common forms of disorientation and causes accidents too. So how do we deal with this particular aspect?
Well, as the survey said, it has to be intuitive. So if you are banking left, your index has to go with the bank. So chances of error are that. So you have basically, it is very simple. You have to change the orientation from what we described as commercial and coming back to general aviation. But ultimately, it boils down to recertification of the thousands aircraft which are flying commercially. So it is basically dependent on the regulator to take a stance that this is not acceptable to us since it is a potential unsafe situation. We had seen this situation in Air France 447 accident, the pitot tubes being blocked. I was flying in India with an operator, and every time we entered the cloud in monsoons, the autopilot stripped alternate law because of issues of icing of pitos. This was before the 447. And we kept telling the OEM there is an issue. They said, no, nothing. You increase the heating element so that the ice can melt, or increase the size of the drains, or do more cleaning. But that didn't help. Ultimately, after 447 happened, we said nothing doing. We are changing the manufacturer. We changed the OEM and things got solved. So even though the manufacturer was involved in this, the aircraft manufacturer, but they never admitted there's anything wrong with the system. So it is not so simple to say that things can be sorted out. But the core is that pilot should be aware of what's happening. If there is a design defect or anomaly, or there is anything which pilot should know to help him sort out the situation, that should be brought to the fore immediately and not be hidden in wraps just because it is a certification issue like the TW800. The court said that the recertification would have cost a lot. So that is why, to avoid that cost, both FAA and Boeing did not apply for recertification. We saw that in 787 APU battery issues. NTSB has squarely blamed both the regulator, Boeing, because Boeing was trying to pass it off to USA batteries, that they were outsourced the batteries, but you can't pass on the responsibility. So you are outsourcing your work. You are supposed to have quality control, and the regulator who's approving needs to take responsibility for the quality checks. Pilots are, of course, they need to be informed that something is wrong and something might happen.
Right. On similar lines, Varun has also asked, what is the reason that commercial jet manufacturers, in spite of overwhelming evidence, still have non-intuitive bank angle in the attitude indicator? How can we adopt the safer GA convention?
Right. The only thing is you take it up with your operators or the regulator. The basic idea of this webinar is to have a discussion. So unless you have discussions and debates, I don't say I'm correct or I have the knowledge, but unless you debate and discuss, things won't reach to a stage that we get united that, yes, this is a safety issue and we have to take it up with the regulator. So awareness is the first thing, that there is something which is wrong and can be corrected. So then ask the question, why is not being corrected? So that is the basic idea of this webinar. So as you rightly say that it is so basic, why is it not being done? Which means either the regulator is not aware that this is a big safety issue. So if we discuss, he might be aware and they might take it up further. So it is all about how you manage safety, how you manage change. So as a part of safety management system, when you do change management, something new comes up, you have to analyze how would this affect my operation and safety. And that needs to be recorded with a risk analysis, like you do with the NEOs. So the new engine came up. So there has to be a risk analysis carried out of what all changes are there and what risk can be or what risk can come to the fore. So a latent risk of failures of the bearing or the blades. So that was something new. So that is the latent risk which comes up with every new thing which comes in. So you have a new technology. So you can expect some new type of failures.
Right. We have another question which says, till the design philosophy is not addressed, should this not be an important part of TEM module and during PM duties?
Well, of course, threat error management is the core. And pilot monitoring, as I said, the role is not well defined. Even in the new ICAO training syllabus, one of the criticisms of competency-based training and assessment is that pilot monitoring is not one of the competencies which is being assessed. So, and it is a very critical role. And we have, I can see Captain Amitabh, he was instrumental in the 787 induction. Maybe he can comment on something.
Would you like him to speak now?
iPad 82.
iPad 82. Okay, I can unmute that.
Captain, you want to comment anything on?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
You were instrumental in the Boeing 787 induction. So when a new technology comes in, so what sort of challenges do you face? That is what we want to know.
Okay, that's interesting. See, a lot of challenges were in the cultural issues of the airline. There were challenges in the regulatory authority, the kind of training they wanted. So these were the two issues that we really faced, and we sent a team of people to Singapore to go through all this. And yes, of course, seeing whatever you are talking about here, I quite understand and agree. Boeing was not very willing, or a manufacturer is not very willing to go in for a design change based on the operator's feedback. That's one thing I noticed, and I think that is something we needs to be addressed at a particular platform.
So you think a common platform, because Boeing and Airbus philosophy, again, that's a big issue.
Yes.
And pilots keep transiting from Boeing and Airbus. Even in the artificial horizon, we have seen there have been accidents wherein the pilot had transited from a military to a commercial, and he got confused with the role. So standardization, commonality, there should be some agency we should look into it. Having worked with Boeing, what is their outlook?
So I've had I've been fortunate enough to have interacted with Boeing and Airbus at various convocations and meetings. And yes, Amit, what you're saying about common design philosophy, terminology, flow patterns, this is such a conflict, and this would definitely add to the safety. So instead of the airlines trying to create a commonality between two aircraft types, I think it should be done at the design manufacturer's level itself. In Air India, we had Airbus pilots coming on to 787, and we had, of course, the Boeing pilots coming in. And now at Vistara, I see a lot of Airbus pilots, I mean, all our Airbus pilots coming on to 787. And this issue is there, the design philosophy and the terminology. And this would lead to a safer environment if it could be on a common platform.
Thank you, Captain Amitabh. Sargam, you have more?
Yes, I have Savio, who says that, as mentioned by you, European designers are feeling the need to invest in the human factor as against only in the aircraft system. What, in your opinion, could be done by us in the aviation industry as an interim measure till these human factor issues are addressed at an institutional level?
Well, one is the design aspect, human behavior. In our training also, what is projected is the human behavior. So our outlook and the final outcome, what you see in the flight deck is the behavior. That could change from day to day, depending on the circumstances. So one day you come for a flight, you are well rested, you had no issues coming, and you had a pleasant flight. The second day you come in and something small happens, you snap at another person, and the whole, what we call CRM, goes down the drain. So a society plays a lot of vital role. So humans are social animals, and we cannot basically disconnect ourselves from the society. So when we talk about design, the society also takes, like Captain Amitabh said, cultural issues. So you have the national culture, the organizational culture, and your personal culture. So how do these three interact with each other? Your behavior will also show that the cultural aspect. So human behavior can be controlled for a limited period of time, but when you're put under stress, then your the true nature comes out, as you say. So you would have experience in ADAPT when you are selecting pilots. So a lot of pilots, either they go into a huddle, they become speech recessive, or they become aggressive. So these human traits need to be trained as far as human factor is concerned, so that when you are in the flying seat, you are kind of, you have disconnected because everything is taken care of. I take an example of 777 Air France cargo taking off with 100-ton error in the load sheet. And El Al 787 took off with 40 tons. So these are all airline cultural issues, how you deal in the cockpit, how you behave in the cockpit. So if you have too many distractions or too many things happening, then there is a likelihood. So that is where the Indian concept of mindfulness comes in. So mindfulness plays a very important role, which removes all the clutter. The Norwegian Air Force has been using it for their F-16 pilots, and they've shown very good results of mindfulness, and that basically directs your attention to your task. So while we design the cockpit, but ultimately the pilot also has to perform. If he has the knowledge and he's not able to use his knowledge because of distraction or other things, so he should be aware of his limitations and then be able to recall faster. So you have to be at peace with yourself. So these softer skills are very important at this stage, and doesn't cost much. It is an individual's lookout. Corporate can always help.
Right. So I think that is all the questions that we have today. If we want to take any comments, Captain Amit.
We have, in the next few webinars, I plan to discuss the social aspect, social conformance, that humans are basically conformists. We like to conform with what others say. And there are also neurological aspects which come into play, which are called mirror neurons. So, for example, if you go into a room and you see very jovial people, very happy, that lifts your mood instantaneously. So that is what a lot of people neurologists called mirror neurons. So if there's something sad, you become sad. So how does one control all these things and still be able to tackle pressure in the society where there is a large amount of power distance index? Do we want to be yes men, which humans tend to be, and how to avoid that? So these aspects are more important than the technical ones. Technical, yes, somebody is looking at it. We need to look at that, but these are deeper aspects which we need to look. I would like to conclude with that, but going further, the base has to be expanded. We need not stay inside the cockpit, but what's happening outside also. How are we affected by other things, the environment and the society? So those are certain important aspects which I would like to emphasize. If you have any suggestions, most welcome. You can do more research and come up with a better study.
Right. Thank you, Captain Amit. I think with that, we can conclude this webinar. And to sum up, I would like to say that when things get busy in the cockpit and the crew needs to focus on high priority things, the ability to think through and remember diminishes. The flight crew can become confused with the advanced state of automation. So that's why I think we can safely say that we need automation to assist and not replace the flight crew that is responsible for the safety of the flight. I thank you all for joining us today, and I hope to see you all again in our next edition. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.